I'm just after coming from, I'm campaigning for Green Leaves here in the UK, because I'm one of these left-wing Greens who's campaigning against the EU for all the reasons that the Green Party over the years opposed all the different treaties. The treaties haven't changed. The undemocratic structure is still in place. In fact, it's got even worse over the last number of years with the various different changes to the treaty. Now, I know that this session is on foreign policy and also on the militarisation of Europe, because our David Campbell Bangerman, who was here earlier on, mentioned about the whole issue of an EU army and a common defence. And I was at a meeting this morning with some people from the Remain campaign, and of course they can't try and make claims and rubbish your position without actually any reference to the treaties themselves. But what David said this morning is very, very important, because the treaty does provide for not just the common foreign and security policy, but also the common defence policy. And of my understanding, Britain has no opt-out on the common defence. Therefore, it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to be part of it. And I just want to read, because I think it's very important so that you understand that I'm not exaggerating. Article 42 of the Treaty on European Union says the common security and defence policy shall be an integral part of the common foreign and security policy. So the common defence policy will be an integral part of the common foreign and security policy, and it shall provide the Union with an operational capacity drawing on civil and military assets. The Union may use them on missions outside the Union for peacekeeping, conflict prevention and strengthening the international security in accordance with the principles of the United Nations Charter, which of course I'll come to again in a few minutes. But the performance of these tasks shall be undertaken using the capabilities provided by the Member States. So Member States have to have the capabilities to provide for the European Union to flex its military arm. And it goes on to talk about the progressive framing of a common Union defence policy. It will lead, that's the words, this will lead to a common defence when the European Council so decides. Okay, it's there in the treaties. A common defence is there. A European army or a European military force is there, and the common defence, there's a commitment from all member states, well, bar Denmark, who has an opt-out, including the United Kingdom. So David Cameron has got no opt-out. In fact, he's got no opt-outs on anything. I can't believe he's coming out and getting away with it, saying that he's got, Britain has got an opt-out in ever closer union. He has no opt-outs on anything. He went to Brussels, he got nothing except a bag of empty promises from a bag of politicians who will renege on every single promise. And to try and mislead the British people on this is absolutely outrageous. I mean, there is no changes to the treaties. He's got nothing other than political promises, which as a politician himself, he knows what they're worth. You cannot get any changes to the treaty without unanimity, and there is no way, I believe, firmly believe, there is no way that the other 27 member states are going to amend the treaties in such a way to facilitate the British, and that the member states which have to ratify those amendments are going to agree with it. It isn't going to happen. And I just want to point out another thing. Member States shall make civilian and military capabilities available to the Union for the implementation of the common security and defence policy to contribute to the objectives defined by the Council. Of course, one of the objectives, because it very much links into what Marianne was talking about earlier, is to ensure security of supply of essential resources within the European Union. It's about flexing your muscles. So you've got a military muscle to flex so that you can actually ensure you get the resources from the countries that you want to exploit. That's part and parcel of the whole agenda of this common defence. But the other thing is important here as well, and because when it comes down to you're talking about things like your national health or what you're spending your money on, it goes on to say that member states shall undertake progressively to improve their military capabilities. The agency, that's the European Defence Agency, which we'll come to in a minute, the agency in development, research, acquisition, armaments, this is the European Defence Agency, shall identify operational requirements, shall promote measures to satisfy those requirements, shall contribute to identifying and, where appropriate, implementing any measures needed to strengthen the industrial and technological base of the defence sector, and shall participate in defining the European capabilities and armaments policy, and shall assist the Council in evaluating the improvement of military capabilities. Now, the reason I just wanted to read that bit out, there's a huge role here for the European Defence Agency in deciding on policy and deciding what member states will spend on their military capabilities. And I want now to go to, where did this European Defence Agency come from? When I was in the European Parliament in the early 90s, I discovered that the European arms industries were lobbying the European Commission because they were bemoaning the fact that since the end of the Cold War, there was a massive slump in arms sales. Terrible thing that people aren't buying enough weapons anymore to go out and kill people with. So what they did was they lobbied the European Commission to set up an agency that would represent their interests and that they would be on. That agency was set up. It was originally called the European Armaments Agency. But at the Thessalonica Summit in 2000, it was agreed to establish, they changed the name, a European Defence Agency. The European Defence Agency. Where did it come from? It came from the lobbying by the arms industries to get this set up. Now it has been put in the treaty. There's an article further on which talks about the treaty, the European Defence Agency being established and the role it will have. And why I'm saying that is very important. It's like putting the fox in with the chickens to try and control. The European Defence Agency is not going to turn around and say to member states, oh, we think you should demilitarise it a little bit. We think you should cut back on arms spendings. Why would they? For God's sake, their livelihood depends on it. The arms industries depend on member states spending more on military capabilities. And so there are two very important things here. One is in relation to the key role that the arms industry has in EU policy making on armament spending. And the second thing is there is a commitment to a common defence. It's there in the treaties, and Britain has no opt-out. Those are two very important things that have to be pointed out. Now, I just want to go on as well to talk about foreign policy itself. And we have been presented with this. The European Union is a wonderful peace project. If it wasn't for the European Union, we wouldn't have peace in Europe. We wouldn't have peace in other parts of the world. Europe has been very instrumental in promoting peace in all these different countries. And we've just heard from Marianne, I didn't know about the coffee thing, but that just shows the irony of the whole situation. It's the new modern type of colonisation by the European Union to exploit the resources of the developing countries. And if you look at the two, we were talking about this morning in relation to foreign policy and how the European Union interferes when there is a possibility for some member states to actually do something positive in relation to promoting peace. And one was about in relation to Sri Lanka, where the Scandinavian countries were negotiating with Sri Lanka in relation to trying to come to a peace deal. And the European Union stuck its oar in there and prevented that from actually happening. And the Norwegians were left on their own because the European Union calls the shots and decides what's going to happen, and even if it's in the interest of peace. And in fact, what the European Union did was actually completely counterproductive and encouraged and facilitated violence as opposed to helping to prevent it. And I want to mention one other in relation to Morocco. Morocco, and I'm going to come on to this because I think in relation to foreign policy and trade, they're very much linked. Yeah, okay. And that is in relation to the fisheries policy. The EU will negotiate agreements. It is in agreements with Morocco. It ignores the fact, you saw the map earlier on there, where it shows a huge amount of the coast just further down from Morocco belongs to the Western Sahara. About 1/3 of that coastline is the Western Sahara. Even the United Nations, there's it up at the top there, you see the yellow part? Western Sahara. Even the United Nations recognise that ain't part of Morocco. What does the European Union do? The European Union agrees trade agreements, including the Western Sahara, which is not part of Morocco, pays Morocco for the rights of the EU vessels to go down and exploit the waters of a country that doesn't even belong to them. That's the arrogance of the European Union and its lack of respect. So when you look at this, I mentioned earlier on about the common foreign and security policy and the common defence and all this is going to comply with the United Nations. It's not going to. If it's in their interest, it ain't going to. And there is no way that's a very good example of it, right? Now, I just want to come to one other thing in relation to exploitation of in particular, African countries, the West African, and also further down you saw the island of Mauritania. When I was in the European Parliament in the early 90s, one of the first reports I did was on a fisheries committee agreement, with Madagascar, which was down there, a huge big island. The European Fisheries Agreement was completely, I wasn't even aware of this until I did it, it was completely exploitative. They paid them very little in relation to what they were giving. And of course, it went to the government, it didn't go to the local fishermen. It's so that the EU could export its overcapacity, because they had way too many vessels and they'd fished every fish out of the European waters, and they were going to go and see where else can we exploit, so let's exploit these African countries. And when you see the European Union saying it gives money into these countries, it's given money in there to ensure that what it has set up, that it can continue to exploit. It hasn't got to do with trying to make the people in these countries self-sufficient and be able to determine their own future. In that agreement, it was quite clear that it was completely exploitative. The money was going to the government. It was going to decimate the local fisheries, the fishing industry, the coastal industry. But one of the key things as well was it was actually decimating the coastal communities' supply of food. They depended very much on fish for food. And when I brought this up with the Commission at the committee meeting, the Commission turned around and said, oh, well, it can follow the EU vessels and pick up the discards. That is the attitude of the EU. So please don't believe when you hear that the European Union is a wonderful peace project interested in the interests of peace, disarmament, human rights, or whatever. I'm going to finish on that, I think, because I'm gone over time. But it's quite clear there's a common defence. There will be a European army, or whatever they want to call it. The European Arms Agency is very much involved with a key role, so it can boost the arms industries. And the agreements that they have with other parts of the world are pure exploitative agreements that these countries have very little say in. Thank you.